Okay, welcome everyone to the sixth episode of Creators Arena, brought to you by Creators of Product. Today we are lucky to have with us Aditya Vikram. He's been working with Amazon for last few years. Currently, he's a senior product manager there. Previously, he has worked with Traction and Dr. Reddy's, and today he'll be sharing about how setting up processes can help us make better products and how we can use them to set our products for success. So without taking a lot more time, over to you, Aditya. And thank you very much for taking out time to do this with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Divakar. It's always a pleasure to be able to give back to the community and interact with them. So, the topic that I chose today is something that I kind of learned over time. That is, how do you create the right environment how do you set your product up for success? Right. So we've already talked about who I am. I'm a senior PM at Amazon right now. I am basically responsible for creating alternate delivery choices apart from your home deliveries for Amazon India. And that's my charter. In the past, I've worked in a plethora of companies, both small, medium, large companies. And before doing an MBA, I also have an experience in consulting. So I've done a whole host of different things across sectors. Been in Traction as a B2B space, been in B2C. I was not in product interaction, but I used to manage a big team, so I know what it's like to own something. Um, and as always, these views and opinions are mine and in no way linked to any of my employers, current or past. But yeah, I have learned a lot in these different organizations and hope to give you guys some of those inputs and learn from you as well. So, so as I said, right, why is this topic important? I think that's the first thing that I want to kind of get out there. The topic is really important because sometimes, especially as PMs who have a particular product charter with them, we kind of get clubbed to that small space and we don't really realize what we need to do to really set up the environment so that the product actually succeeds. And I saw that a lot of people are from startups, are founders, and as a PM, it's always hard to kind of devote time to this because you're always launching things, you're always releasing new things. Whether you're a PM or not, sometimes even in many non-PM roles, they're very similar. There's a lot of day-to-day activity that just needs to get done. And you just don't have time to really set up the whole thing as a professionally run business and something that's set up to gather momentum over time. Um, and the current product that I own is a very 0 to 1 kind of a product where we are actually gathering momentum and we're actually solving the 0 to 1 problem. It's not something that's very large in India right now. So therefore, I can't stress this enough that over time, as you kind of get into this, how do you make sure that you set this up correctly? So yeah, in order to make this really actionable, my idea was to not cover too much space, not go very broad, but try to find those 4 or 5 things that I think have helped me in the past and hopefully will help you guys as well. So it's 5 ideas. And for each of them, I have 4 to 5 practical steps that uh, I've tried to not make too generic in my output, in my narration, but I've also tried to make it, it's the right balance, try to make it as useful as possible for everyone while trying to keep it as pointed as possible. Um, and
Yeah, it's
Yes.
good.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so the first 2 things, right? The product PM fit and identifying the right market is really about choosing the right product. And then once you choose it, how do you orient it towards the right market? And then the rest 3 are once you're in it, how do you kind of set up this environment around you, and set up um, your work with your stakeholders, and how do you drive it for success. So that's the way I've kind of divided into these things, and each one builds on it sequentially. So as you're going into a role, or you're already in a role, how do you find your fit within it? Then how do you twist it to face the right market? And once you've done that, then how do you drive it through? You get the right momentum, and you keep iterating on it to you listen to your customers, and then you get everybody on board, your tech teams, your partner teams, everybody on board. So that's the way I've kind of structured it. Um, yeah. So in general, you'll see two slides. The first slide will just be motivation on why it's important. You'll see two quotes there trying to say that people who are um, who we all know, who we've all heard, have said something important about them. And then the second slide is really just the 5 steps, and I'll take you through them. And then um, hopefully, if there are any questions, we can, as Devakar said, we can take them at the end. So the product PM fit, right? This is something that I don't think I can stress enough. This is going to be important, as I saw many of the people want to move into a product role. So it should really be something that resonates with you. It should be something that builds on your current skill set. It should be something that excites you. The way that I look at it is, um, there are a couple of things that you need to do, right? Like, think of it like this: if you were to invest your money, where would you do it? And your time is your money, right? So don't invest it in areas which don't excite you, or at least try to get out of those areas as soon as you can and go into an area which does excite you. Having said that, when you do get into an area, there's always going to be a learning curve. So be patient, give it the time. But the idea that I would say, especially for people who are trying to, at this point, really learn what product management is and how do they move faster, or how do they build right the good products, then the idea is you want to get a good mix of what you already know. That is, for example, for me, it was deep analytics. I was really good with Excel. I was really good with business analysis and really getting insights, because that was my background. I came from consulting and then some implementation side. And then what do you want to build on, right? So for example, for me, the building on part was about how do I get my communication right? How do I reach to the right people? How do I lead large teams? So that's where my current product really fit with me. And if you just know about this and you're conscious about it, it'll give you the right mix of nervousness, because you'll be challenging yourself, with excitement, because you'll know that this is something that you're excited to do. So and a good product PM fit can turn around a product, like, hands down. Just if you're a founder and you have a team of product managers, or if you're leading a team of product managers, then just having this fit right is the first thing you need to do. And it's a very personal thing that comes with each PM. So it's very hard to get right as well. The second thing that you need to do is you need to find the right market that you go after. So this is another thing that I feel we don't always have a lot of control over, like when we look at the macro sense. But as you get down, you can always, as a product manager, tilt it towards one side or the other. And you should always favor the side that's always, the market is always going to get momentum, right? And you have to have some kind of understanding of what's happening in your market to be able to do this. But if you're generally interested in things, you read a lot, you what I was saying was, yeah, so you have to identify the right market, right? And the idea is, you have to find the market which, so your product will naturally attract a certain market segment. And when you debate it out with your teams, you'll know that, hey, I can go after the pyramid, I can go after the top of the pyramid, I can go after the bottom, I can go after the middle, all of that stuff. You know, according to your customer segments, and different companies do it differently. For example, some companies might do it from city segmentation. Some might do it from customer evolution, like how many days has the customer been with us, or what's the customer tenure. Some other might do it based on some other things. But whatever those segments are, identify which segments are naturally attracted to you, and that can be done by just understanding in terms of like your own customers, what is the split, like what's the histogram, where does it go up, where does it go down, and then from that segment document why your product works and does not work. It will probably take you about um, you know maybe 2-3 hours to do this. It's not going to take you long. It's just that 2-3 hours of dedicated time where you just understand which segment really works for your market. Um, and then out of that, just make sure you know which one is worth going after, right? So there might be certain segments that you feel are going to grow big, but you need to know whether they're actually going to grow big. For example, um, if your product is tailored towards rural India, um, but for some reason it's not gathering the momentum. Have you read the right resources? Is there enough growth in that in those locations or in those subsegments that you're going after? Do you need to just shift it a little bit to go after the segment which is growing so that you build the right customer base? And then once you've done it, you need to prioritize it in all decision making, right? And it has to be crystal clear. It has to be that specific market segment that you're going after, and every decision is towards that. And if you fit that well, then it will extrapolate to others automatically. But if you don't fit it well for one particular market, then you'll always have the problem of kind of making it broader. Getting a niche right and then making it broader is significantly easier and more is a better approach in my view than going after everything and just getting a small piece. Um, so now that you've done both of these activities, the third thing that you really want to do is you want to measure, you want to monitor, and you want to manage the metrics. Right. So at this point now, what you've done is you've kind of identified, hey, this product really works well for me. I am suited for this. And then you moved on to, okay, now that this product works really well for me, I have found that this is the way that I can tilt it towards the right market. The third thing you want to do is then you want to define how you're going to measure it. And I think anybody who's been in product management knows how important KPIs and metrics are, right? So you want to define the right set of KPIs and metrics, and you want to measure them early on, and you want to keep measuring them over a long enough time frame, and especially with your product launches coming in. So if your product launch is happening once every month or whenever that ship out is, you want to make sure that you measure it both pre and post, and you want to understand through every flip what's happening through every launch, right? So for example, the first thing I would say is get the right metrics right. Most business problems that I have seen cannot be done in 1-2 kind of metrics. You need a little bit more than that. Because you'll have like the customer space, you might have marketing in your product, you might have other things that you're managing, right? Operations, customer service. Depends on the product, depends on how many angles you have in it. For example, my product actually has many of these touch points coming in. So therefore, I want to measure on each of those axes what is happening, right? Um, and then you have to define the broad category, and then you have to go deep. Ideally, you should have somewhere around 3 to 5 metrics seem the right range to me. I have always found it difficult managing more than that. It tends to lose my focus on the top priority. And anything less just doesn't cover enough base to really help customers orient themselves and really benefit from the product. And it doesn't help us identify the right gaps. So the mental model here is simple. You have those 4 or 5 metrics. Those are your leading metrics that you want to definitely track, and you want to track them on a X frequency basis. The frequency is something that you define on how frequently they change. There can be things that change very frequently just because there are, let's say, operations involved, or there is because of some other external factor. Things are happening very quickly in your space, and you want to measure them daily, or you want to measure them weekly. And then there are things which only change when you really ship out stuff, which might not happen on a weekly basis. So you want to measure that as a monthly thing. So just know which metrics they are, how they're split, and what is the frequency. Then the third thing you want to do is you want to set up the right engagement models to monitor these metrics. Um, so I generally like to have most of these metrics reviewed in the morning, so that I know if there is anything that is breaking that I need to, kind of escalate, get sort of prioritized during the day. So I take out the first 30 minutes for this. Earlier, it used to be in my cab ride to office. We all know where that's not happening now. So now it is during the workday, the first 30 minutes. Um, and you might want to do something similar. Just having a dedicated time, make sure that you don't skip it. Like nobody calls you, nobody gets you into something that you don't need to be. So have that engagement model, and when you have that model set up, have the right teams or stakeholders there, because product is just a role which has um, many times a lot of different stakeholders. You don't want to just review a metric um, which with with no output, right? There's no point of just me looking at a number and not being able to do anything without it. You want to either have your operations team or your customer support team or whoever that stakeholder is that has a direct impact on that metric would either know why it has changed in its direction or can take actions to improve it. You want those people in the same meeting, um, or whatever that mechanism is, so that you can drive those actions. And once you've set this up, respect it, um, and retrospect on it. Um, by respect it, I mean that hold it as sacrosanct and hold the meeting as something that you really want to do and you want to do it frequently. And if people don't show up, hold them accountable and bring them in. Sometimes they will fight, sometimes they will cry that this is taking a lot of time. That's okay. If you get one good action item out of this once a month, it can mean a lot over time. Yeah, and then obviously have a retrospection. If the model doesn't work, you should break it down because it's a tax on your time, and then reinvent the thing. So that's how you would implement this. I know a lot of people talk about metrics management, but I think I just wanted to kind of lay down the steps that have worked for me, and might be something that you guys benefit from. The fourth thing here is listening to your customers. Um, I I think I'm probably the last person who's saying this, but a lot of people have already said that your customers are your most important source of learning. I'm in an organization that actually values that a lot. You guys would have seen that Amazon is basically a very customer-centric organization, and therefore it is extremely important for us to be close to our customers as much as possible. And I have not seen an anecdote that says do not listen to your customers. So this is my point number 4. The reason why it's point number 4 is because all of this right now is setting it up, but over time this really takes precedence over others, because if you're in a role long enough, then this just kind of keeps gaining importance once all the other things take place. Hey, are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah, it's going okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
So yeah, so how do you listen to customers? So there will be different ways of doing this, right? So it depends on your market, depends on your organization. If you're a B2C company, you can probably sit in with some of the customer service agents whenever they're solving customer problems. You can, if you have chatbots active for customer service, or you have emails that come in from customers from grievances, you want to listen to that. If you're in a B2B company, the two ways that I've seen my friends implement this is either be on pitch calls where the BD team is pitching to customers, listen in, understand what the customers are saying, what their reactions are, what do they want, what do they not see, um, and the other way is when customers are leaving, They say, I don't want to sign up anymore. I want my money. I don't want to invest anymore in your organization as a customer, as a client. Then you want to listen in why that's happening. A lot of organizations generally have those calls. So that's the other place where you understand why customers are really churning out. So once you do that, again, this goes back to how you set up the process. Then you have to have a review process on this once every X months or whatever you want to do it. This depends on your situation. Um, you can devote, let's say, 4 hours to it a month or 2 hours to it on a month. It depends on how much time you have and how much bandwidth this requires. Um, but you should definitely have at least more than 2 to 3 hours a month set up for it, because especially in early stage products when you are still discovering where you want to go, because it's very important to understand what customers are asking for, um, and whether your product is living up to that jobs to be done thing. Um, okay, the other thing that this really helps you is point number 3, where it points you in areas which you might not be either measuring or you can't measure, right? So when I say you can't measure, it's because either the instrumentation is missing, that means the numbers aren't getting captured and you might want to prioritize that with your tech team, um, or you just aren't doing it because in step number 3, when you were identifying the metrics, for some reason you overlooked it. And this doesn't mean that it has to come up, but at least you should start measuring it and decide if this metric needs to move up to the regular measurement, or does it stay down, and maybe it's just something that I take a look at every month. It's not that big enough, but it's something that can hurt me in the long run, so let's just measure it. Then the fourth thing is, um, try to measure it. I think I've already talked about it. Just make sure that you don't brush it aside. A lot of times, especially when uh, you are with other stakeholders, and this happens a lot in big organizations, there are definite reasons that, okay, we found that there was this one outlier event that happened that led to this escalation. Um, you learn it the hard way that there are no outlier events that happen to one particular customer. They happen more frequently than you know. The uh, like there'll be out of 100 customers that reach out to you, maybe one person is the one that you caught, right? 100 out of 100 people, maybe 99 did not even raise an issue and just lived with it and decided, hey, I'm not even going to use this product going forward. So try to measure it, and especially if it's anecdotal, there'll be a multiplier of 100x, whatever, 1000x that's impacting your product, right? And then just go back to your metrics, make sure that you you review them and they are making sense. Sometimes your metrics need review very frequently because the things are just changing, and this will help you do that. Um, so that's where listening to your customers really becomes important in running that well-oiled machinery that will help you push you towards your goal. Um, right. The other important thing here is, when you do listen to your customers, have an open mind. A lot of times, what ends up happening, especially when you're in a role which has a lot of stakeholders, that the metrics are telling you something that you don't even want to listen to yourself, or the anecdote is telling you something that you don't want to listen to yourself, you don't want to listen to, because it's just something you might be way too passionate about it, and then you don't believe that it can be true, or your stakeholders might be managing without raising an issue, and they might be managing it in a way that's not scalable, that's not uh, like 100% there. So, so that's what this really helps you do. The fifth thing is how to effectively engage your tech partners. So I've kept it as tech/partners because I'll put a little bit more emphasis on tech, because I think the tech partners are one of the key stakeholders for product managers, and you really need to look at them as a separate kind of entity, and the other partners, customer support, operations, marketing, legal, all of those can be managed separately. But tech is really something that you have to have a different kind of engagement with, right? And this is how do you, this is the last part. Now that you've made the machinery kind of toggle ahead, how do you get people on board and make sure that everybody is aligned, right? And I think one of the key things that I at least learned in my startup stint uh, was that there is the right answer is out there somewhere, um, and the more you, like, even if you just get it reviewed by 10 people, 15 people who are sitting next to you, your friends, it doesn't need to be like formal reviews with customers, but any kind of first level inputs will get you like 80% of the way there. And once you've done that, then the rest can just happen over time. Right. So you can't solve everything. We all know that. You will always end up releasing with certain kinks there as fast follows or improvements that you'll do over time. But getting to that 80-90% problem is something that, at least for me, the startup stint really taught me, and um, made me open to the fact that, hey, you should reach out more, especially in a flat hierarchy. Then you should reach out more to your peers, maybe to people who are reporting into you, because they would know some things that you probably have missed, right? So in all your discussions, always start with the problem. Um, One of the things that helps me do this is in my meeting notes, when in my meeting invite itself, at the top I say this is the problem. So the agenda is specified in the meeting invite. Okay, you guys are going to see black because the lights went out here. But I just want to check. I am audible, right? My internet should still be working.
Yes, it's
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. So yeah. So in your meeting invites, just make sure you specify the agenda very clearly. It helps drive things. A lot of people do not do this, and it always tends to problems. And when you do that, the first number that you're going to say is, we are having XX problem. And then you can just explore things. And I've written here tech team, but in any case, with all your partners, especially with tech, always start with the problem, because I have realized, at least like in Amazon, which is a very big world, there are always like 10 solutions, and you might be thinking of one of them. So just getting directly into, hey, let's implement this, might be a longer route than the one that you could have taken, just because you don't know those things, and there is a reason why those people have the expertise that they have, right? Um, the other thing that I would say we should always do, right, as PMs, is whatever your roadmap is, and whatever you're managing, that, hey, these are the 45 points, these are the things that I launched this year. Um, Always have one or two things that you found on your way, or you were open to, and then you experimented. My sort of internal thing is, let's have one unbudgeted feature that nobody knew existed at the start of the year or at the start of the planning, but we found out through some way that there is a tech gap, or there is a thing, or maybe it's not even a tech solution, it's a completely operations program driven thing that they are able to do. But always be experimenting that one thing. What it helps you do is, it helps you find things that you might have missed, and it helps you build your pipeline, right? Sometimes it might even lead to a sudden jump in your product adoption or feature usage, or whatever you want to call it, that you hadn't expected, and then it helps you reprioritize very, very quickly. And many of these solutions are so small that when you launch it, you gain a lot more than the investment. So always think like you're the company's owner and you're actually putting money there. So if you were to put money there and you found this thing that costs you 10 paisa and gives you 1,000 rupees, you'd probably do it, right? So that's what my orientation there is, that have one experiment pulled out of the hat uh, that helps you understand the market a little bit better. And the last point is, when you do build your roadmaps, please understand that generally a lot of these teams, right, their motivation levels will only sustain if they see the metric moving, if they see enough excitement, both in you as well as in the numbers, and you keep them updated. So I like to mix a bit of short-term, small initiatives, quick fixes, and quick wins with uh, long-term projects. So I generally like to keep a mix of one or two things that we just keep launching very quickly, and I try to tell my tech partners also to do that. That if you find something small and if it's a fix, can we do two things parallelly, so that we kind of we have that motivation and we see that impact happening very quickly. Um, right? The idea is that you want to make sure that your product is continuously inching towards, especially if it's a 0 to 1 product, because every sort of thing that you build is built actually on top of whatever you had earlier. So the 10th or the 11th thing has a compounding impact. So you want to make sure that you've built enough layers in there so that the next thing you put on top has a solid foundation, right? It builds on a huge building instead of like a smaller building. So and this actually depends a lot on where you are and how your teams are structured and how your product is structured. um, but if there are smaller wins that you can get, I would always go for it. It's a little bit harder to do because that means that you have to maintain a really big backlog, and you have to kind of make sure that you balance it out, and then you do all your Gantt charting, and then you say, okay, Jan, Feb, March, these are the things I'm going to launch, and then bam, in March I'm going to launch something big. Then you do some small win, and then you do it big. So that's the idea. But that really helps sustain the motivation of both your tech teams as well as your other partners, who will then see the product moving in the right direction. So that's the brief 30-minute presentation that I had. Divakar, you want to
Yeah.
take me through
So
the Q&A?
Aditya, I think all the points that you mentioned were on point and very, very relevant. Thank you for doing that. So let's go to questions. I just open the chat. You can see that as well. Achal Garg, do you want to ask your question, please?
Yes, Shirakar. Hi. Hi, Aditya. Thanks for the chat. This question is pertaining to the identifying the right target segment for the product,
Okay.
wherein you mentioned that we should look back into the existing data we have and try to see which segment what works.
Yeah.
However, in terms of a startup, the primary data may not be available, right,
Right.
in that volume. So, would you recommend a secondary data research, or would you say that you should go and try to target the most probable ones and maybe hit and trial and try to find the fit? What would you recommend there?
So so secondary research is valuable in my view, but I've always found it to have certain gaps. Like if your product requires people to put money down,
Hmm.
um, then people will say something and do something. Like there are certain things that uh, people like to say uh, that are like the popular belief. Or if you ask any customer, hey, would you do this? Yes, I would. But if you actually tell him to put his money on the table and give it to you to do this, then the thing will be very different. And like if you're in a startup, then you probably know that already. Um, so and generally secondary research takes a lot more time to just get it out the door. So my opinion on that is, if possible, launch and iterate quickly. The execution mode is better, and it gives you the right inputs because you can see what is the actual is it actually working or not. um, but yeah, you want to make sure you balance out in terms of the investment. You don't want to invest like months and months of effort and then say, oh, this doesn't work. If it's a small thing, then definitely do the iteration. If it's a big thing, then you might want to go with the secondary research kind of route.
Perfect. Thanks, Aditya.
Yeah.
Shubham Jain.
Yes. Aditya, you talked about 3 to 4 different metrics, but what if the means any product would be driven by different departments, like the technical department, the marketing department, customer support,
Right.
and others. So yes, if all are managed by different people, then how to manage them on a single metric. For example, the idea of a North Star metric. That is, you look at the pole star and you just sail towards it. So if we define the idea of a North Star metric says that we should have a single metric for which will add value to your company, to your product, and it will drive all other metrics.
Right.
What do you think about that?
So, so actually that's a great question, and you will always have this challenge. So here is the way that we do it. Here is the way that I have my orientation towards it. It has worked for me because it helps me prioritize, and that's where my recommendation is. That within each department, right? Like, so you are product, your primary, let's say you are product, your primary metric will be adoption or users or whatever that is, right? So that has to be your North Star. The customer service can have its own North Star. Customer service can say how many people rated me positively after the chat or after the call. And your operations can say something else. And then your uh, marketing can say, hey, I reached, my number one metric is reach, right? And then each one of them can have different metrics, and that's fine, because the good part is then everybody will be innovating to reach like the different pillars, right? But as a PM, the problem that I've always faced is you have to prioritize, and prioritization is often between metric A and metric B, right? Because within a metric it's always simple, like you're just going to go with the top one. It's the question is always across metrics, that hey, do I make it do I drive customers, or do I make it whatever, do I do something for my operations and make them more streamlined? That's the challenge I've always faced. um, and the way I've done it is I've always said this is my guiding metric. If there is no tech bandwidth, if there is nothing available, this is the one I'm going to go after, and just do some retrospection, right? At the end of the year, if you achieve that one metric and you lost out on all others, um, would you be fine, or would you not be fine? And if the answer is fine, then you know that it works. Does that help?
Okay, but what if means, are you saying that it is not possible to have a North Star metric, or are you saying that it is always possible to have a North Star metric?
I'm saying in your role, so different departments can have different North Star metrics, and that is absolutely fine. You
But
don't
the
need to
idea
have.
the idea of a North Star metric is that it all should have a single metric, so that all departments can have the same goal in mind.
See, I actually don't think that's possible.
Okay.
Or I actually don't think that that's going to be beneficial also, right? Like, think about it, like your customer service, their metric will be to either reduce the number of incoming calls or to handle them as effectively. But they will not manage, they don't own all of that, right? Some of it is just owned by somebody else. For example, if there is a gap in your payment system and refunds are not getting triggered, then that's something that's owned by you, and the number of calls will increase. And if the calls are increasing, then all they can do is the only controllable metric that they have, right? And I think that's the other nuance that you can think about, like what is controllable and what is uncontrollable. Like your customer service, the number of calls coming to them, apart from repeat calls, everything else is uncontrollable because there's an issue in some other area. That's why people are calling, right? So for them, the really controllable metric is how well they're responding to the calls, right? And they can just take those two or three metrics. How much time am I taking? Am I super efficient? Are my customers happy? And are my repeat call rates, right? So those three metrics can define your customer service. But for the product, it might be something else. And it's as long as each one is taking those 3 or 5 metrics for that product, then you will do the whole. you'll complete the whole gamut, and each one will innovate on their own behalf and solve that problem.
Okay, thank you.
So Shubham, just want to add to that, that it's also a matter of the size of the company, the size of the team, the time where the company or the team is. For something as large as Amazon, there might be a North Star metric overall, which could be profit or revenue. But to be able to break it down to all the countries it is executing in, to all the teams, and then breaking down so that each of those teams can focus, it can be a bit difficult. However, if there's a small team starting up something, 10 people sitting in a room where they can change the direction of the company every 2 months or 3 months, they can change the strategy. A North Star works well in that setup. But what Aditya is saying is also correct, that if you're thinking about a large moving machine like Amazon, it will be difficult for them to have one metric to which everybody can align. So that metric would need to be broken down into so many multiple levels, so that everybody who is doing their part can connect to some specific number.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's listen to what Abhay has to ask.
Hi Aditya.
Hi there.
Some time back you told we need to set up a tech team as a partner to solve the problems.
Yeah.
So this led me to a query: should this product team really exist in the very first place? Should not can't a tech guy work as a product guy as well for the better productivity and efficiency?
Okay. So I think the product's role is really different. Product's role is really to do a full spectrum kind of thing, right? Which means product's role will evolve across managing the tech, launching the right products, getting marketing to do its marketing on time, getting customer service to react to customer queries on time, getting operations to operate at the right thing, getting legal sign-offs in case required, getting UX to do the designing. So I think it's like asking whether a CEO should exist, right? So CEO in a company will not go and do any, right? Ideally, CEO in a company will not go and do each one of the functions unless like it's a 5-member garage company in which the CEO is coding or just has one particular functionality under it. But as you grow, let's say to the 100, 150 range, that thing has to kind of circle off somewhere. And in my view, you'll probably lose a lot more productivity if it's part of tech. And you lose a lot more context because the person will have his day job. The person will also have to manage tech resources or whatever. Like, so different companies have it done differently. For example, I have known product managers to sit within the tech teams, so reporting to the same SDM, SD manager. Then there are things where they're just removed by, let's say, not that far apart, like cousins. And then there are certain situations where they're completely away, right? Where you have absolute zero sort of line of authority. So I think it depends on the size of company. In the early stages, as Devakar said, you can probably do without a product, but then you're going to get a product that has a lot of rough edges, and you're okay to live with that. But over time, you will need somebody to kind of think through the whole thing. I don't think the tech team will have the bandwidth or in fact even the expertise to think across all of these. Like they can't do UX, they can't do marketing, they can't do all of that stuff. So how do you bring it all together is where the product comes into place. And also, it also becomes as the one person that you need to hold accountable if anything fails, right? So that's the role that the product manager has to play.
Okay, so the accountability wala funda is the main anecdote here.
So accountability is obviously I would say one of the most important things. So, but the other thing is also just bringing the whole picture together, right? I think most good products, they have a long-term vision, and the way it works is that vision needs to be thought through and evaluated, right? And it can't be just like it can't be like I've just drawn it on a piece of paper and this is my long-term vision. that's not going to work, right? It needs to be tested, it needs to be thought through, it needs to be evaluated against 10 other alternatives. So who will do that? So that has to be a product manager.
Yes, yes,
So it's more
understood.
than accountability, but there are actually a lot of things that this guy has to do. Unfortunately, he has to do a lot of various activities, and that's why if you look at any one activity, you'll say, oh, he's only doing, whatever, 5 hours a day, but he's probably managing like 5 hours a week, but he's probably managing like 10 of those things. So he's giving me 60 hours. Okay.
Yes, Aditya, I had one more question.
Sure.
Some time back you mentioned we in later stage we should listen to our customer. So I thought at that time, shouldn't this listen to your customer should come at the very beginning of?
Yeah. So my intention wasn't to say you listen to your customer at a later stage. I'm really sorry if that's how it came out. My intention was that that's where it kind of really builds your value in terms of like getting the message across, right? Like once you build some metrics, then you will know what you're going after. You should always listen to your customers, right? But if you don't know which market you're going after, then listening to all customers will just be really distracting, right? For example, you don't even know whether you're going after segment 1 or segment 2, or you don't even know if your product is an urban product or a rural product, and you go and ask feedback from both Bangalore, and you go to then you do a lower tier city like Agra, and then you go even like some deep lower tier village, right, with a population of 10,000. You're going to get very different impacts, feedbacks, right? But should you be using that is something that only the earlier steps will tell you. The earlier steps are all one-time or lower frequency things. Customers listening is a daily or a weekly or whatever is the more higher frequency thing. But you should know who you're listening to. Right? You don't want to just listen to everyone and be in a soup.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Utkarsh?
Aditya, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, thank you for this amazing session. I really love those quotes. So my question is, I read that Amazon is famous for its small teams, which Jeff Bezos came up with this 2 pizza rule. Now, the question is, isn't it really difficult to align goals when there are so many different teams?
Yeah, it is. And so is your question, is it difficult? The answer is yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean,
how do you align?
How do you align? Okay.
If there are different teams have their different goals and set up 2 pizza teams, how do they align between themselves?
Right. So, so we have a whole way of working that helps us do this. And it's aligned at the really start of the year, and it stays aligned for the rest of the year. And we are now a big enough, like obviously, organization that many of these things are well thought through at the leadership level. So, for example, whether my area is important enough or not to invest in is something that's been decided, let's say, X years back. And then that's just going to be it. Now, getting everybody to align and getting the details ironed out is something that I will have to own and I will have to manage, right? So the alignment has a process in itself that I'm not like really going to get into, primarily because it's an internal thing. But the way you can think about it is, right, is if your goals are not aligned, then obviously you'll have troubles launching your products and making people work for it, because all tech teams will have 1,000 things. But there is a whole alignment process that happens right at the beginning. So for example, if my roadmap is a 50 line item product initiative, I'm going to launch 50 things this year. I'm not going to launch 50 things, I'm just giving an example. Then if I don't get alignment on 5 of them, it's okay. I still have, like, I'm not going to be able to launch 50 things. I'm going to launch 15 or 20 things. But I have 50 things in my pocket. So I will always be able to basically move towards my North Star metric. The alignment will happen at the metric level saying, okay, we need to do this. Within that, how you get it done is something that the individual product manager will own, and that's his job to get done. And sometimes it will be a mix of getting the right people in the room, or if it can't be done, then you live with that and you move on to something that can be done. It's a little abstract with the kind of details that I can't share, but that's what it is.
Sure, I understand. Thank you.
Rupin?
Hello. Hi, Aditya.
Hey.
So my question was that, what makes Amazon different in what it does? That, because all the like some of these things at least that you've mentioned, many other organizations also do. But how does Amazon do it differently that it becomes like this execution taskmaster? What's so different about Amazon?
So that's a really good question, and to be honest, that was one of my motivations to join Amazon after a startup, because I wanted to understand how these guys are just able to execute, at a scale and at a level which many startups have challenges to do. And I think it's in the limited experience that I have, it's the mechanisms, and that's why I stress a lot on that. It's all of the stuff that I talked about. It's empowering the people. So to be honest, I think I could probably talk like hours upon this. We don't have that. So the top 2 or 3 things that I feel that really help a company operate is having a set mechanism. One thing that I learned in Traction really well was discipline, and there are people on this call who have been a part of that journey, who know what it was like when we had to report every day at 9 o'clock and every day at 7 o'clock it was lights out. And it's very unstructured and tech teams will not like it. But I think the second part is discipline. So have the right mechanisms and processes in place, the reviews, the discussions in place. Once you have that, have the discipline to stick to it. And the third thing is patience. Like some products just have a long lead time. So if you're in a company that is building something that the market will take 2 years to understand, and you don't have runway for 2 years, or you have 3 months to test it out, that's not going to work.
Sure. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have one last question from Anas Ansari.
Hi, Aditya.
Hey.
So I have 2 questions for you. The first one would be, so I know that customers' behavioral data is being captured by every app. Like everybody is trying to understand what the user is doing, right? So majorly, I have seen most of the companies, they use it purely for marketing, running marketing campaigns. But I think there's more more to it. So what does Amazon use this data apart from running marketing campaigns, if you do it all, And
okay.
Yeah.
And so do you want me to take that before we go on to your second one?
Yeah.
So what do you mean by behavioral data?
So by behavioral data, I would say basically events capturing from the app.
So I think
the customer journey and everything.
Yeah. So I think, to be honest, I have not seen such uses in Amazon in my tenure. A lot of it is actually you'll be amazed at the simplicity of things, right? So we don't do all of this tracking. How will you track? Like, how will I track where your eyeball is looking at? Like all of that conspiracy theory stuff that I have the video camera on and looking at a customer's eyeballs. That's not happening, right?
So I meant the basic events. For example, a user clicks on something, goes to X.
Yeah.
On something.
So clicks and things are, I think, part of every product, right? Like as a product manager, if you're building, so you would capture it and you would optimize for it. But I think the good thing that I've seen, especially with Amazon, and I think, to be honest, it's there in most companies, is that they have guardrails on what you will not do, right? And so you will not do certain things that will break trust of the customers. And I think that's true for all, not just Amazon. That's true for it's true for all the companies that I have worked for. And I have not seen it break. Like for example, even in like I'm just taking a random example. Like if you are in HR department and you're part of hiring, you are technically collecting emails. For all you know, you could do a marketing campaign on top of it. But I have not seen even a startup do it.
Apart from unethical
that might
things,
just be
my question was like a very simple. Apart from all unethical things that we could do with the data, my simple thing is: do you experiment with the app based on the clicks, or you with new feature? Do you check whether these clicks are changing? And this is just an example.
So I think the question is more around personalization.
Right.
Got it. So this goes back to what your primary metric is, right? And then I think what you're talking about, so the way we actually do it is we have, as I said, we have certain metrics, right? For every experiment that you're creating, there'll be a metric that you're tracking. And that metric has to move. Like, so I think there wasn't, basically you're doing a A/B test, and you're saying in your control versus treatment, has the treatment actually moved or not, right? And then you have all of these other metrics which are more company level. Like you don't want to break, like because of your one metric, you don't want to break company profitability, or you don't want to break company revenue, or you don't want to break right? You don't want to break any of the other things, right? So you have your guardrail metrics, exactly. So you have your guardrail metrics which should not go down, and you have your lead metric which should have some benefit for the customers. So as long as you have that and you are measuring everything, then I think it kind of auto takes care of stuff, right? You probably don't need to go on like clicks level. You can live with the top level metrics, which are conversions and all of that stuff.
Oh, got it. It's a nice, actually. It is more simpler than capturing those. Okay, my second question is: have you like tried to engage customers who like leave Amazon like app, or difficult
so to be honest, I don't have it. I have. So I have not engaged customers very to understand that. What we do try to do is we do have some metrics and we do have some experiences that we know are bad, right? Like over time you'll understand, okay, a payment failure is probably something that customers hate because their money is stuck. So if customers have left the app just before a payment failure, just after a payment failure, so then you can attribute it, right? So that's the way that I have been able to triangulate things to understand what really went wrong. It might be that, hey, the guy just had a bad experience for 3-4 times in a row. And then he said, this is just not working, right? And only 0.00001% of their customers ever have that. But if you just take all of the customers who have left the platform and then you understand what was their last experience, and then you might want to do some hypothesis there, then mostly if you're capturing your instrumentation and your metrics measurement is right, then you should be able to understand why they left. And once you start addressing that, you will get the attriting problem can be solved.
Okay. Thanks, Aditya.
So that's all the questions that we have. Folks, can we have a big round of applause for Aditya? Can we unmute and...
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was very useful, very relevant. All the details on execution, all the minor things that we have to take care about on metrics, on communications, on teams. They're all very, very relevant and useful for everybody listening. So thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thanks for all the questions. Some of them were really challenging. Thank you.
Okay. See
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.